Greetings, alchemists. Alchin here. Been a while since I recorded one of these, but it's time to go into our Moonstone Island Spirit card tier lists. Pretty similar format, I guess, to the Spirit passive ability tier list I did, except we're going to be ranking the various cards and how powerful they are in combat. Now, I'm not going to do all the cards together on one super list. I'm going to divide these into separate videos and separate lists by element, because not all elements were created equal in this game. If we were going to do one super list, it would be like a bunch of dark, psychic, and a couple of neutral cards up in the S tier, a bunch of fire and ice cards down in the D tier, poison in the A, and kind of just spread like that. And I don't think that's very interesting. I think that each element in this game is trying to do something very different, and the cards should be ranked in how well they do the job that element is trying to accomplish. Although neutral doesn't really have an identity as strong as any of the various elements, this is definitely going to be a lot more general, and we're going to see a way bigger range here than in any of the other fields. So let's just get right into it. Starting pretty simple with Bash. We all are also going to be ranking the cards in their best version, which is probably always the plus version, unless it doesn't have one such as Bash, which just comes in its regular form. Bash reduces target's armor by half of your speed stat. So one of the few cards that, actually the first two cards are going to be the only neutral cards I think that scale with speed. So the fastest spirits are the one this goes on. Bash is simple. Bash is plain, but Bash is pretty necessary. It's the only armor reduction card that scales with a stat, and that means that as you get later and later into the game, all of the other armor cards, except for Bash, are going to fall off. Reducing armor is important in this game because of the game's dizzy mechanic, where when a target's armor is reduced to 0, they become stunned and take 1.5 times damage. So missing a turn and taking extra damage, plus that armor by each point reduces the damage of your hit, means that if you're doing a plain damage strategy, where you're just sort of hitting the enemy down for health damage, not worrying about burn or poison, you're going to need some form of armor reduction, and Bash is just the best at it. We're going to put Bash in the A tier. It's necessary. It's required. It isn't sexy, but it does what it does, and it's necessary. Moving on to Bite Plus, the other scaling speed card. This does half of your speed damage 3 times for 1 mana. So, I guess if you have a specialized speed spirit that's, doing your Bash plan, if you want to mix in some damage, Bite would be the only card that scales with speed. But honestly, your Basher should be a dedicated Basher. You don't really need to pollute your Basher's deck with non-support damaging cards. You're better off having another spirit with a damage plan. There's good synergy here with Charge, I suppose, with the multi-hits, so you could run a Bite Plus plan. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's a great plan. We're going to put this in the C tier. It's workable, but it's not a strategy that you probably want to go with. Moving on to Blind Blow Plus. Blind Blow Plus is 1 mana. Draw the top 2 cards of your deck and reduce their energy cost to 0. Yeah, incredible card, actually. There are lots of game plans where a Blind Bow Plus are incredibly powerful. If you're playing decks that focus on heavy, expensive cards, you have a lot of momentum pluses, or you're running a fire spirit with a lot of flamethrowers, you can run Blind Blow Plus and get pretty good odds that you're getting a strong discount. It replaces itself and gives you an extra card and gives you a discount. The Blind Blow Plus is a card you're happy to have in any deck. We're going to put it up in the S tier. There are a lot of plans that hinge on this card. It's card draw, it's energy cheat, it's a skill. Just beautiful in every way. And it's an exhaust card. This is interesting. Blind Blow Plus, usually I'm happy to have exhaust on a card because it trims your deck down, but I'd be pretty happy just to play Blind Blow Plus every time it comes up. So it's one of the few exhaust cards that I would rather if it didn't have exhaust, which means that it's an incredible card. Usually exhaust is a benefit. The fact that it feels like a detriment means that it's an S tier card. Guaranteed. Our next card is Booster Pack. Retain and exhaust, 1 mana. Booster Pack, you choose 5 random cards. Sorry, you get a choice of 5 random cards, and you get to pick one. That one gets added to your hand, and then you discard the rest. The normal version is 3 cards, and it works the exact same. So, I think this is going to be our first D tier. It's nice that it exhausts and retains always a plus, but at the end of the day, right, your deck is like a tightly curated plan. You want your deck to be a nice trim, 8 cards for spirit, 24 cards total, and you want to do things that reduce that size. And every card you put in your deck should be there with an intense purpose in mind. Booster Pack just puts random cards in your deck. It might not synergize with what you're doing, it might not help with your plan. It's probably just going to be some junk that you don't want to see. Yeah, you could high roll and get some incredible 5-star card that you couldn't find to put in your deck, but you're probably just going to get some garbage, so I can't put it any higher than that. Next, we have Cheater. Cheater is a 5-star Waldo exclusive card. It's pretty hard to find this card. I eventually managed to find a couple, but before I did, I had to go to the Discord and get some help in finding this card, and huge thanks to Latent Cesario for finding the image that I used to crop down into this. So what Cheater does is lets you look through your draw pile and reduce any one card in there's cost to 0. So it's 1 mana, pick any card, and reduce its cost to 0. This is really good, again, if you're running a high value deck. If you have lots of 2 or 3 cost cards in there, you get a huge discount on playing them. The only problem is that it's a rare card. You're probably not going to have a lot of them in your deck. You probably don't want more than 1 or 2, even if you could find more. And if you draw it before the card, after the cards rather, that you want to discount, then it's just kind of dead in your hand, and you gotta wait for the whole deck cycle to play it again. And you can't just play it and discount anything, because it's an exhaust card, and it'll be gone, and that'll ruin your plan. It is, valuable. It is a good plan, but I don't think it's as generically useful as Blind Blow Plus, because you don't draw the card. So I'm going to put it firmly in the A tier. Mana Cheat's great, but that's all it is great. It's not endlessly valuable like Blind Blow Plus. You will eventually get to the point where there's nothing to hit with this. Yeah. I think this is firmly its position. Next we have Consume and Consume Plus. Consume Plus reads, choose 2 cards to discard, gain 2 energy. So it's a 0 mana card. You throw 2 cards into your discard pile and you gain 2 energy. Now there are better cards that give energy in the Psychic and the Dark packages. But this is the only neutral card that allows you to gain more than the starting 2 energy. So if you're not running a Psychic or a Dark plan, Consume's probably going to be the only way that you accelerate your energy. Now, we already saw other mana cheat cards that reduce the cost of cards to 0, and those are probably better plans. They're definitely cheaper plans since they don't cost you cards in hand. So I'm going to put Consume Plus firmly in the B tier. It's useful. There are definitely elements that you'd like to run this on. You know, if you're running electric support or a water support, and you need to figure out a way just to cheat a little tiny bit of value in, Consume Plus can do the job, but you're probably better off doing that with Blind Blow or Cheater. So we'll put it in a B tier just because you get it earlier than those other 2 options. You know, you might run this as a stopgap measure until you find the mana cheat cards that you actually want to run. After that, we have Doff Defense, another Waldo exclusive card. This discards all the bash cards currently in your hand, and then you draw that many cards. The normal version exhausts them instead. This is a card where I might hear the argument for the normal version being better in some niche scenarios, because it trims your deck down. But if you're running bashes, you probably want to use them. So the discard version's probably still better. Now, I just said you want to use your bashes. Yeah, while the enemies have armor, you do want to use your bashes, but if you get to a turn where you have all the enemies' armor at 0 and you draw a bunch of bashes, Doff Defense can be a good reset mechanic to refresh your hand and gain some new options. But you have to have the bash cards in your hand. If you just draw the Doff Defense and you don't have any bashes in your hand, it just kind of becomes, 1 mana do nothing. I think it's a 1 mana card. Hold on a sec. Let me open my image in paint.net. It's really hard to tell in this little screen right here what the cost is, and I don't have the cost of the Waldo exclusive cards in my note. That's a little bit of an oversight. So just be patient for just 1 moment while I navigate to my Moonstone cards and navigate to the neutral. Doff Defense. Yeah, it's a 1 mana card. Incredibly situational. You have to have the cards in hand to do it. I'm going to put it in the C tier, I think. It doesn't make your deck actively worse like a booster pack can do. But the fact that it could be a dead card in hand that you get no value from sometimes, and the value you do get from it is, again, niche at best. You're probably only getting 1 or 2 cards off of 1 mana. It's retain, so you can hold it onto it into your hand for, 2, 3, 4 turns until you get the bashes. So we're going to put it firmly in the C tier. It's an option you can run. You're not incredibly happy to do it, but it's there. Fancy Spin Plus. 1 mana, discard 1 card, draw 2 cards. So, Fancy Spin Plus, you have to, you play it, you discard another card. You're really just going card neutral. It's not really a card draw engine. It's just a fish for options. If you just didn't have the Fancy Spin Plus in your deck, you would have seen that other option anyway. So this is really just like a 1 mana discard 1, draw 1 at the end of the day. No thanks. There are way more efficient ways to do this. There are way better plans. We're going to put that firmly in the D tier. I don't think you'd ever really want to run a Fancy Spin Plus. It's even the unupgraded version discards a card, draws a card, and then you spend itself too. So you're like -1 cards, the base fancy spin. Just absolute garbage. Nothing that you want to see. Follow through. 1 mana, draw 1 card. If you draw an attack card, reduce its cost to 0. So 1 mana, draw 1. Again, it only replaces itself. And the odds of getting the if you get the discount off, it's fine, especially if you're running expensive cards. But the odds of getting the discount off are completely dependent on the deck that you're playing. So, like, if your card is like, 80% attacks, then you get an 80% chance to get the discount off, and this might be a pretty good card. But compared to just running Blind Blow Plus, that does the job infinitely better, and draws 2 cards and discounts all of them, yeah. Why would you ever run this? I'm going to put this and its brother follow-up into the D tier. Follow-up is the same thing, except for skills. You draw 1 card. If you draw a skill card, reduce its cost to 0. Exact same problem, 2 situational. These would be C tier cards if Blind Blow didn't exist. But Blind Blow exists, so why would you ever put either of these in your deck? They're just completely outclassed in every way by superior cards, and they don't really have a place in any game plan because of that. Next is Foresight Plus. Look at the top 3 cards of your draw pile. Choose 1 to add to your hand. So, this is a scry card, essentially. It gives you information on what's coming up in your deck that could be valuable in future turns. If you have any retain draw cards, it'll inform you if you want to bother using them now, and you get a draw anyway. We like information. We like draw. But it's 1 mana, draw 1, so it replaces itself. I'm not going to say that you just get the card you would have got otherwise with Foresight, though, because you get 3 options. So it gives you range in searching your deck. I think we're going to call this firmly a B tier, middle of the road card. It definitely has a place. Information's good. It's a skill. There's some good skill synergy. I just think that 1 mana is a little bit much for this. Am I crazy? I don't think in an end game deck where you're running super optimized card draw plans that the range Foresight gives you of information is as valuable. But in the early game, having 1 of these in your deck, being able to plan around things, I can't say it's a bad card. It's just firmly a mid card. Alright. Oh, sorry, my mistake. There's another Waldo exclusive card that we have to get through first. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off Plus reads, discard 1 bash card from your hand, gain 1 energy. And again, the normal version exhausts the bash. So, it's Doff Defense, but for energy cheat instead of card gain. And it has the same problems that Doff Defense has. You need to have the bashes in your hand. It also has retain, so you can wait a few turns to have the bashes in your hand. And energy cheat's a little more rare. I think we're going to put it in B tier with Consume. It's kind of the same tier of option as Consume is. You're only discarding 1 card instead of 2, but it's a hyper-specific card. But it's a little better in that you can hold on to it with Retain, and you can wait until a turn that 1 energy is going to be more valuable. So that Retain is probably the only redeeming quality this card has. It lets you really wait for the perfect timing, the perfect options. Yeah, B tier card. It's got value. It's got a place. Again, if you're running a psychic or a dark spirit, you have way better ways to do this, but we'll talk about that in their particular videos. If this was like an all cards in the game tier list, it might lose some traction. But as a neutral card, it's firmly B tier. Now, Graverobber Plus. Draw one random card from your discard pile. 0 mana skill. This is good. It's card draw, and it draws you a card that you already played, and if you played the card, it's probably a good card. Yeah, 0 mana, draw a card that just replaces itself, but it replaces itself with something that you wouldn't have been able to get until you cycled your deck otherwise. I think we're going to drop this in the B tier. It's not great, but it's valuable, and if you only have a couple of cards in your discard pile, a couple of high value attacks, something you discounted with Cheater, then you're pretty happy just to cycle that option back. Yeah, the fact that it's random hurts a little bit, but you can plan around it. Not retain, so you can't plan too hard around it. You'd really rather get this in your first hand or your second hand of any particular draw cycle. But you made your deck. Hopefully you didn't put a booster pack in it. You're probably going to get something that you want to play. So we're happy to just draw a card that you want to play. 0 mana, yeah. B tier it is. I could see the argument for putting it in C tier. I could not see the argument for putting it any higher. Next is Hindsight Plus. Look at the top 3 cards of your discard pile. Choose one to add to your hand. And the unupgraded version is 2 cards instead of 3. So this is the same thing as Graverobber, but you pay a mana, but it's less random. It's the top 3 cards of your discard pile. I should have tested this. I wonder if the top 3 are the first 3 things you put in your discard pile, or the most recent 3 things in your discard pile. I think, despite costing a mana, either way, this is better than Graverobber, because it's just more targeted. If you're running this plan, you would know how it works, unlike me, and you would know the options you get when you play it. So pay 1 mana and get a card that you know you want from your discard pile. Lets you recycle things during any particular deck. Yeah, we're going to put this in the A tier. Card draw that's targeted is always good. It lets you tutor out something that you definitely want, and if there's no options in the top 3 cards of your discard pile that you want, you just don't play it and save the mana. The fact that it's more expensive than Gravedigger, Graverobber, doesn't really hurt it at all. A tier it is. Happy to have it. Although I've clearly never run it. Yeah, again, there's just better options if you're running Spirit or Dark plans, where in one turn you could draw through your deck multiple times. But if you're not a degenerate, Hindsight Plus is a great plan to get extra value. Moving on to Impatient Plus. Put 3 random attack cards from your draw or discard pile on top of your draw pile. And then the unupgraded version is 2 random cards. It's random cards. You could really fish for things. If you're running attacks, they're probably going to be high value. You could use this to like set up a really cool turn with the anger mechanics in Earth, maybe. You could like put a 2 angry on top of your deck, or whatever that card's called. If you're running a fire plan, you could put your flamethrowers on the top of your deck. And the fact that it's your draw or your discard pile means you have to have like a really tightly planned deck to get value of this. And you either have to have cards to draw into it this turn, or be setting up a plan for next turn. I think this is good. We're going to put this either in the A or B tier. I don't know. I think it's too specific a plan to really... It's 0 mana. It doesn't cost you much, but it doesn't replace itself. It doesn't draw you. And this is like a setup card. It doesn't like enable a crazy game plan. I should have had this talk at the start of the video instead of here, but how I'm kind of setting up the tiers is that like S tier is a card that enables a crazy game plan. A is a card that supports the game plan that these set up. B is a card that enables an okay game plan. C are the cards that support those okay game plans. And then D is just something that doesn't really fit into any viable game plans. With that in mind, I'll put this in the B tier, I think. I think it could be a defining card of like a cool attacking game plan where you run like a tight set of attacks and you want to fix your deck to get them at certain points. Like maybe you have an Ankleo and you want to plan around his crazy rage turn. You play this the turn before. You fix the deck a little bit. I think this would be an A tier card if it had retain, but the fact that you have to play it the turn that you draw it means that you can't quite fix things as much as you like. But I guess that'd be too patient for a card called Impatience. So it's probably thematically appropriate that it doesn't retain. But I'd rather it be powerful than thematically appropriate, and that's why it doesn't go any higher than the B tier. Moving on to Inspiration. Put a random skill card from your draw or discard pile into your hand. It costs 0 this turn. So 1 mana, fish for a skill, discount it. Hopefully it's a skill that costs at least 1. It exhausts itself, so it gets rid of itself. I think we're happy about that with this card. If you're only running a few tight skills, you can specifically target something with this. But skills are really good, and you probably want to run a good pile of them. I think we're going to put Inspiration once again in the B tier. It does something fairly valuable. If you're running this kind of plan, good for you. Yeah, it's just a solid B tier card. It doesn't really do anything special. It's a random seal card from your draw or discard, so you can get something back, or you can just get something you haven't seen yet. The targeting's pretty wide, other than being a skill. But at least it's not just one or the other, you know? If you have a skill somewhere, you're guaranteed to get it. And the discount can always sneak in there and get you some value. Probably don't want to fish for any neutral cards with it. So far they've all been pretty cheap. But you could get some of the interesting 2 mana electric skill cards. Yeah. And that's pretty thematic considering it's a light bulb. Maybe run this in your electric plan. It's not going to be a star card of that plan, but I think it enables it pretty well. Anyway, let's move on to, I believe this is Knowledge. Yeah, Knowledge. Shuffle 3 random psychic cards into your draw pile and reduce their cost to 0. The normal version does 2 random psychic cards and doesn't give you any discount at all. So definitely don't run the normal version. The normal version would firmly be a D tier card. There are some garbage psychic cards. Like if you got like a free the 0 mana deal 0.25 power psychic damage card. Free Thought maybe is what it's called. You wouldn't be happy about that. But there are definitely psychic cards that you would be happy to get reduced. It's just like too much of a gamble for me. The fact that they're psychic cards, which means they're probably above average, and you get the discount, means that it's not as garbage as Booster Pack. But this still isn't a good plan. We're gonna put this in the C tier. Like, I'm gonna say there's like a 60% chance you're happy with at least one of these cards, but they go in your draw pile instead of your hand, so you're not gonna see them for a while. It's nice that it exhausts, so you're not endlessly filling your deck with garbage. If you did this every single deck cycle, you'd eventually just fill your deck with trash, just by law of large numbers. But the fact that you do this once and then it's mercifully gone means that you're only really adding 2 to your deck as far as the way. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not in love with this. I think this is as high as it goes. Moving on to Loose Change. Shuffle 3 random cards into your draw pile and reduce their cost to 0. The normal version still does 3 cards, but you do not get the discount. Better than Booster Pack, worse than Knowledge. The fact that it's random cards means you're probably going to get some garbage you don't actually want in your deck. But if you reduce the cost to 0, then you're getting value out of them. It's mana cheap, and you could high roll and get something powerful. Yeah, C tier it is. It doesn't actively make your deck worse. There aren't better cards that do the thing it does except Knowledge, which is also firmly a C tier card. We'll leave it there. I could hear the argument for it being in D. But just for the sake of it, balancing this list out a little bit, and signifying that it's definitely better than Booster Pack, we're going to leave it here. Alright, moving on to Mastermind. Put a random attack card from your draw or discard pile into your hand. It costs 0 this turn. So 1 mana, you get an attack. If you're running a deck that you plan around Mastermind, you can, according to Keikaku, all part of your master plan, build a deck that only has expensive attacks and cheap skills. Cycle through to your Mastermind using the cheap skills, and then draw your heavy hitting attacks no matter where they're at. We're going to call this an A tier card. It's worse than Cheater, because it's a random attack card, but you can build around it. And if you build around it, you're probably going to get something that you're pretty happy with, and you get it right to your hand, unlike Cheater. Whereas Cheater just gives you the discount somewhere and you still have to draw it, Mastermind pulls it to you, which makes the randomness not so bad. No matter what, you're getting something you can play, and the Mastermind waves goodbye and deletes itself from your deck. It's a shame that the discount is only this turn, so you don't continue to get the value from Mastermind. But you could plan like a pretty sick turn around this, where you like play a bunch of charge cards, and then you Mastermind for a big, powerful multi-hit. Yeah, we're pretty happy to see Mastermind. It's a cool option. A card. Next, we're moving on to Momentum Plus. For the rest of combat, whenever you play a card, draw 1 card. 3 mana is a little expensive, but this effect is insane. The unupgraded version is just for the turn that you play it, and it's not worth the 3 energy. Momentum Plus is probably worth the 3 energy, but if you're doing a Momentum Plus game plan, you're either running it with spirits that are psychic or dark that generate you crazy amounts of energy, or you're just finding a way to cheat this out for 0. I don't think you ever want to play it for 3 energy if you only have 3 energy. It feels bad to waste an entire turn on this setup, but maybe you still do, because this enables so many infinite plans. There are so many decks where you could run Momentum Plus and just play cards forever and have a turn that never ends. You just cycle through your whole deck, redraw your whole deck multiple times in one turn. If you're playing a psychic game plan, it's very easy to get up to 9/9 energy. Fortunately, it caps at 99, but that's fine. That's plenty. You can cycle through your deck like 10 times with that much energy in a Momentum Plus. Absolutely crazy card. If you've never run this, give this a try. You're going to be happy. It's just the gift that keeps on giving. Every 0 mana card you play starts to cycle itself. Maybe you play another card that like the 2 mana do fire damage 3 times, draw 2 cards, that becomes draw 3 cards. It just increases the value of every single thing you play, and it just never, ever ends. Absolutely incredible card. Give it a try. I promise, you won't be disappointed. Patience! Put 1 card from your hand on top of your draw pile for 0. This is fine. Say you're playing a cheater plan, and you draw the card that you want to cheat with cheater, and you have a Patience in your hand, you can put it back. But the odds of that lining up aren't super high, unless you're quickly burning through your deck with Momentum. Patience in the C tier. It's just too situational in my mind. There are a lot of cool things you can do with it, and it's an interesting setup card. Even if you don't want to, do a cheater cheese with it, the fact that you get that control of guaranteeing that 1 card currently in your hand is in your hand next turn means it's interesting. I don't think interesting is inherently good. I think it's just not worth the deck slot in your deck, right? Every card you put in your deck has an opportunity cost, and the situationalness of Patience means that opportunity cost is pretty high. So we're going to put it right there and be happy with that. Okay, peek. Look through your draw pile, choose 1 card to add to your hand. So 1 mana, draw any card in your deck. Cool. A. Simple. It's a direct tutor. You get whatever you want. You're guaranteed to want the card you get. So that makes it almost better than draw 2 or draw 3, You just get something that you're guaranteed to want to play this turn. A tier card. Same with Peer. 1 mana, look through your discard pile, choose 1 card to add to your hand. Exactly the same. Boom. A tier. You had to have already played or discarded the card that you want to play, but you probably, at some point in your deck cycle, have. Yeah. Lots of cool Peer plans you can do. A tier card. It doesn't enable anything crazy, but it supports lots of cool game plans. Moving on to Perception Plus. 1 mana, draw 2 cards. So it's 1 mana. It's retain. Draw 2 cards means it replaces itself and then gets you an extra card. This is fine. There are just way more efficient draw options in the game. Cards that do other things as well as draw are options like Momentum, which just draw for 3 mana, potentially infinite cards. Yeah, we'll say it's a B tier card. If you get it like really early on, maybe run it just to increase the reach of your deck. It's a 2-star card, so it's probably going to be one of the first cycle cards you see. But I think this gets trimmed from the deck pretty fast. There are 0 mana psychic and dark cards that do this effect. The dark card actually has added benefits on top of that. So, like, again, maybe a card worth running if your support is a water or an electric type support. But if you're running a powerful support game plan, this just falls off way too quick. I'm even tempted to bump it down to the C tier, but I think that the fact that it draws card positive means that it ends up in the B tier no matter what. You know, it's just a middle of the road card. It does something. It's retain, which is probably its biggest saving grace, which means you can just hold it in hand turn after turn until you get like a really garbage hand that you don't have anything else to do with the energy, and suddenly you're pretty happy to see 2 new options. In fact, the fact that it retains means that you're not guaranteed just to get a, you know. Usually these cards that draw 2, the first card that you draw is just whatever you would have got if that card wasn't in your deck. But the fact that it lets you retain means that there's like a little bit of buffer there, and it increases the reach of a future turn. So like you can think of it as like next turn you go 2 cards positive instead of 1, you know? You're just kind of storing value for later. If you're running an expensive deck where you're constantly spending your energy with cards in hand, you're pretty happy to bank on this for a little while. So B tier it is. I shan't reconsider. Speaking of reconsidering, we got Reconsider. Shuffle your discard pile into your draw pile. Choose 1 card to go on top. So it's a 0 mana card. You shuffle your entire discard pile into your draw pile, and you get to pick 1 card to stack on top of the deck. This is probably better than the other deck fixing cards because it lets you refresh your entire discard pile. Your discard pile, if you do this turn 1, is going to be guaranteed to be something that you want to play. But then you throw away that hand on turn 2, and you might not get something that you want to play. So it kind of gets worse the later in the deck cycle you get it, but it's still pretty good. And again, you pick the card that goes on top. So it lets you fix your deck in an interesting way. We're going to put this in the A tier, I think. Deck fixing is pretty good. And the fact that it lets you pick between anything in your discard or your draw pile to go on top means that you're just happy with what you get. You're going to have a good turn next turn, or this turn if you play draw immediately after. It's free, so there's not really an opportunity cost other than the card slot itself. Yeah. This one I won't reconsider. It just sits up here happily in A tier. I'm going to put an asterisk on this one. At the end of this video, I might bump it down a tier. Because it's not as good as Peek or Peer, really. Because you don't draw the card. It's not as good as Mastermind. But it is better than Consume or... No, you know what? A tier it is. It's the bottom of A tier. I think it's the worst A tier card. But it still kind of belongs here. Moving on to Reforge. Put 1 card from your hand on top of your draw pile. It costs 0 until it's played. So this is the same concept as Patience, but it gives you a discount, whereas Patience was free. This costs 1 mana. But if you're playing Reforge, you're going to be playing it on a card that costs 2 or 3 mana, probably. And it lets you set that card up for either drawing this turn or playing next turn. I wish this card had Retain. This would be crazy for an Ankleo Rage plan if it had Retain. I guess I gotta put this in the A tier if I'm putting Reconsider in the A tier. The fact that it's your hand means that you're getting a lower range of cards than you'd get from Reconsider, but you get the discount too. I guess this sucks if you only have 1 or 0 mana cards in hand other than this. But if you're running this card, you're probably running it in a heavier deck where it does just fine. There's a chance of it just whiffing, though, depending. I'm going to put it in the B tier. Just because, depending on what's in your hand when you draw it, it could, in theory, be a whiff. I don't think I can put a card that potentially does nothing any higher than the B tier. Even though you're probably getting a pretty good upswing from it, I think it's just a little bit too conditional. And it's a 4-star card. It's for how whatever it is, there's just a pretty high chance that you don't get it, you know? Moving on to Refresh Plus. Retain and discard 0 mana. Discard your hand, then draw that many. The unupgraded version costs 1 mana and doesn't have Retain. Crazy card. Absolutely bonkers. The fact that the upgraded version has Retain and it's free and it completely refreshes your hand, you just hold on to it until you need to fish for something, right? So you draw the refresh, you look at your hand, every card in your hand is a card you want to play. You just hold on to the refresh, play your hand out, end turn, refresh sits there. Next turn, you draw the cards. There's 1 card you want to play, and then the other 4 cards are like whatever. You play the 1 card, you pop the refresh down, and you get 4 new options. You're always happy to do that. It's just a card that you can hold on to and play strategically to refresh your options, fish through your deck, cycle through quickly. Then it exhausts itself, trims your deck down for next cycle. We're happy with all of that. Everything about Refresh Plus, in my mind, puts it in the S tier. For 0 mana, you could draw as little as, you could draw as little as 0 cards, but you're not going to play it if it's the last card in your hand. Anywhere between 1 and 9 cards drawn with 0 mana, crazy. Sure, you're discarding cards to do it, but the range it gives you in your deck is so powerful. The fact that you can look for outs and look for options if you're feeling that it's kind of a dead turn, you can just cycle through and maybe keep on going. And cards that let you keep on going belong in the S tier, guaranteed. Regroup Plus. If the last card plays was an attack card, draw 2 cards for 0. And the unupgraded version just draws 1 card if the last card played was an attack card. So Regroup Plus can be a dead card in your hand if you draw a bunch of skills, but if you're running it, you're probably running a pretty attack-heavy deck. And in that deck, it's a great engine to keep you rolling through and getting more options. We're going to put this solidly in the A tier. If you run it, you're running a high attack plan. I'd say at least half the cards in your deck are attacks. You're probably going to hit a pretty cool turn with it. There's the potential for it being a dead card, but the fact that it's 0 mana makes it a little bit better than Reforge, because, just cycle. Cycle is a little bit better than card fixing, because it increases the chance of getting good options, whereas you have to get the good options in the first place for card cycle to be good. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because it's not budging from the A tier. Great card. I ran it for a long time before I started running my Psychic Spirits. It's just a cool card to keep you moving through your deck. We're happy to see it. pretty high up in the A tier. Maybe when I finish this, I'll like reorganize these to what I think are like the best in each tier. But we'll wait until we're through everything. Retreat. 3 mana, 3 energy rather. Flee from battle, 100% chance of getting away. So there's a skill you can get in your skill trees that just makes it so you have a 100% chance to get away, which makes this card completely obsolete. And if you're running away, you usually want to run away in the first turn of battle, or like as an emergency when things are going bad. And there's a chance you don't get this on the turn you want to do it. I'd say like in the early game, it could be a C tier card. It could save you from losing a whole day if a fight goes bad. But you don't want to plan around fights going bad, and the skill tree makes it obsolete. It's a D tier card. I can't, in good faith, put this on the same tier as like Doff Defense or Bite, cards that like do something. Retreat just feels bad, man. If you're playing Retreat, you're having a bad time. It's making your average deck card worse. Yeah. Yeah. We don't need that in our life. Nope. Mistake. Boop. Moving on to Sacrifice Plus. Choose 1 card to exhaust. Choose 1 card from your discard pile to add to your hand. And then the unupgraded version, you choose 2 cards to exhaust. You choose 1 card from your discard pile to add to your hand. So, 0 mana, exhaust a card, get a card from your discard pile. It's targeted draw, and it discards a card other than itself. So if you're running a card in your deck, you probably want that card. So exhausting it is a mixed bag. We do like trimming our deck down though, and maybe you're running like a tech card. Maybe you're running like a healing card that you don't need this battle, or maybe you're running like a card that purges debuffs. I think one of those exists in another plan. The point is, Sacrifice Plus lets you trim your deck down targetedly and get a card back from your discard pile that you probably want. I'm gonna put this in the A tier, I think. I think this is like a decent effect. It's decent, like great though. There's eventually gonna be a point where this is a dead card in your hand, because like eventually you're gonna get to the point where you don't want to exhaust any cards, and like maybe you could hold on to it until you're sure that this turn you're gonna end the fight with it. But there are other cards that do this effect. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll put it at the very top of B tier. That feels right to me. No, we're gonna put we like trimming our deck down with exhaust. If you trim down like 2, 3, 4 cards with this over the course of a fight that weren't gonna help you in the fight, that were gonna be dead cards in your hand anyway, then having only 1 dead card in hand instead feels pretty good. Especially when you can, just as an emergency option, if you want to end the fight with a card in your discard pile, plop it down. Yeah, this is fine. Only put this in your deck if you're running a lot of tech cards, I guess is what I want to say. If every card in your deck is something that you want to play over and over and over again, then running a Sacrifice Plus is going to feel bad because you're going to kill your key cards. But if you're running tech options for dealing with certain kinds of enemies, then Sacrifice Plus is another technical option that you can run with it to cut it from the deck during the times when you don't need it. So if you're building your deck around it, this is a pretty solid card, and we're happy to see it. So cool. The final card we're looking at today is Tackle Plus. Tackle Plus deals 1.5 times your power in unelemental damage. So this is like at rate, right? For an effect. 1.5 times your power, the unupgraded version is 1 times your power. This is like a fine damage line, but in this game, elemental attacks are just flat out better than neutral attacks. Because you can be weak to an element, you can't be strong against an element. It's not like Pokemon, where like water does 1.5 damage to fire and also takes half damage from fire attacks. Water only does 1.5 times damage to fire, and fire does 1 times damage to water. So there's not really a reason to ever run a neutral damage card. You'd rather just run the elemental equivalent to Tackle. So Tackle and Tackle Plus are probably gonna be the first cards you trim from your deck. I'm gonna put them in the D tier. I think having tackles in your deck just make your deck worse. You'd rather just run the elemental equivalent that an enemy is going to be weak to, or like a tackle plus that do damage at the same rate of 1.5 per 1 mana, but have additional upsides on top of that. There's just not a reason to run a tackle in your deck ever. I mean, like, your deck starts with a bunch of them, and you're going to want to get them out of there as quickly as possible, which means I can't in good faith put it above D tier. You're never going to see a tackle in your options and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to add that bad boy to the deck, unless you're playing a focus deck, which I would consider to be like a C tier Earth deck anyway. I'm going to bump it up to C, just in case you're running an Earth focus deck. If you're not running an Earth focus deck, get rid of this trash immediately. But there is a niche case where this is like the key card for a game plan. You know, for 0 mana, 1.5 times power damage is above rate. Most free cards do between 0.25 and 0.5. So if you're running a Focus Plus game plan, which we'll talk about in the Earth Spirit video, then this is a card that directly enables that game plan. So we're going to put it in the C tier only for that deck. If you are not running that deck, I cannot emphasize enough, drop this card immediately. But that's it. We have gotten through our neutral card tier list. I'm pretty happy with how balanced this tier list would be. I'd probably stand by this. Let's move our cards a little bit to what we think they are within each tier. Momentum goes to the top of S tier for sure. I'm pretty happy with the order of these otherwise. We're going to move this here, put Peak and Pier right behind it, with Mastermind in between. I think Sacrifice Plus goes above Hindsight in the deck where you actually want it. This is just middle of the road. Again, you really need it in the decks that you want it in. If you're running like an ethereal plan, a burn plan, or a poison plan, then this becomes D tier. But in the decks that you want it in, it's absolutely necessary in. I think we put Cheater above Peek and Peer, actually, below Mastermind. Down here. I don't know. I'm gonna leave this one unsorted. I feel very neutral about all these cards. They're all B tier. They're all kind of whatever. Put this like here. I'm gonna move these down beneath these. I'm gonna move this beneath even that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. This is the tier list, guys. If you have any disagreements, we can fight it out. Get real aggressive about it in the comments down below. I can take it. You can get mad at me. It's fine. And if you're happy with the work I did, you can always subscribe to the channel, like the video, tell me what a good boy I am down in the comments below. I'll take vitriol or praise in equal matter. Engagement's engagement, baby. Come and engage with me. I started this channel to meet people and talk about video games, whether that's story or mechanics. I'm deeply in love with both. If you have any free time, why don't you come check out some of my streams sometime? I stream between 3 and 4 times a week, usually in the early morning Atlantic Standard Time, on weekdays, usually skipping Monday. I'm going to be releasing these tier list videos, in fact, to kind of fill the gaps in my channel. These are going to be coming out on Mondays and Saturdays until they're all out. And there's 8 more of these to go, so we got 4 weeks of content for you to enjoy. So again, if you want to see those videos, subscribe to the channel. Please tolerate my streams popping up in your feed, or hey, even me, come join, chat with me. I'm not really a person who's able to really ramble and talk for long periods of time on my own. I know you just heard me do it for an hour here, but I had the cards to inspire me. And I'd love to receive some inspiration from you during my streams, so please, if you have the time, come out and say hello to me. We can have a good chat about whatever you want to talk about. This has been Alex, Alchin, Altoon, whatever the heck you want to call me. And until the next tier list video, until the next stream, until the next bit of content you're interested in seeing, I don't know what time it is for you, so either good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. I'm looking forward to see you next time, and hey, if there is no next time, thanks for just coming to spend this time here with me today. I appreciate every moment you choose to spend with me, no matter what form it comes in. Thank you so much, and goodbye.